Welcome to Money Matters with Doug Jones, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. For today's show, we're going to talk about millennial debt. And specifically, are you a millennial who is experiencing some difficulties, maybe carrying some debt right now that's of challenge to you? Well, if so, then today's guest is going to be of interest to you. She should be a motivator for you. And we're joined today by Jordann Brown. Now, Jordann is what I would call a millennial debt expert or a millennial finance expert. And she has started a personal blog, My Alternative Life. And she's also a contributing editor or writer for ratehub.ca. Jordann, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into it, maybe you could tell the viewers your story from going from graduating from post-secondary education and having debt to where you are today, because it's a real motivator.
Yeah, absolutely. So I sort of stumbled into the personal finance world completely unintentionally. The way that it started was I had graduated from university, my undergrad, and I had just gotten a letter from the student loan people from the National Student Loan Service Center telling me how much I had borrowed for the 4-year program and what my monthly payment was going to be. Now, keep in mind, I was a new grad, so I had just started my first job outside of university and I wasn't making very much money. So my monthly payment was a bit of a shock because honestly, I hadn't been keeping track of how much I was borrowing throughout those 4 years. I was just borrowing as much as they would let me borrow, and I trusted that I would be able to pay it back because that's what everybody told me to do. So yeah, it was shocking how much my monthly payment was going to be, and I really didn't see how I could fit that into my budget. And then at the same time, that summer, I got into a car accident and totaled my car. Now, my car wasn't worth very much, so the payout for the insurance company wasn't very much. And suddenly I was faced with figuring out how to pay these student loans, figuring out how to afford a new car when I didn't have any money to fall back on, and then trying to figure out how to make that new car payment fit into my budget. And it was an extremely stressful summer trying to sort that all out. I did eventually get it all squared away. But after it was all sorted out, I vowed never to go back to that situation. So I was just like every other millennial, and I got on Google and I started trying to figure out how to get my money in order. And I discovered this whole world of people who write about their money. And once I got into that world a little bit more and I got my money squared away, I still had all this excess enthusiasm. So I thought, why not start writing about my story? Because I'm sure lots of people have gone through this. And that's how it all started. And that was in 2012. And
Right.
I'm still at it now.
And you do a monthly update as to your financial situation. And so maybe you can tell us how successful you've been, where you're at now.
So since those humble beginnings of being, having $38,000 in student loan debts and a $13,000 car loan and only earning $38,000 a year, I've managed to pay off those debts, save a $10,000 emergency fund. I have managed to buy a house, fortunately, and start saving for retirement. So, these are all things that, everybody thinks they're going to be able to do, but in practicality, it ends up being much more of an accomplishment than you realize it's going to be. So that's where I'm at today. And I've also grown my income. So I'm still working full time, but then I also have a very healthy side hustle going on as well.
That's amazing. Like, that's an inspiration to people to sort of see where you've gone from to where you're at now. And I don't even think, because I've read through a bunch of your material online, and I know you helped your husband finish off school without a student loan. So I know you've been really very successful and working hard at this. But one of the things I noticed on your blog that I absolutely love the statement, and I'd like you to explain it to people. And it was, live your life, don't buy your lifestyle. I know what it means to me, but can you tell us what you mean by that and what you hope people take from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first put that phrase on my website back in 2012 when I was sort of grappling with the reality of, the lifestyle that I thought I was going to have, and then what my finances were actually allowing me to have. And I was sort of faced with a few choices, and one of them would have been to still pursue the life that I thought that I was going to have, but to put it all on credit. So essentially buying that lifestyle on credit. Or I could have chosen, which is the path that I did choose, to live a more frugal lifestyle, to change my expectations and prosper financially. But now the phrase has taken on this entirely new meaning with the rise of social media and the influencer generation,
Mhm.
because now a lot of people get pressured every day through social media, to be traveling and going out and having unique experiences and spending money that they don't have. And now I think that phrase sort of encourages, hopefully, I encourages my fellow millennials to take a step back from that mindset and to avoid the FOMO thinking and realizing that, the people that you see online and on social media, they're financing most of those adventures with credit. And you need to choose to not be like them.
Absolutely. So I was reading some statistics on FOMO, or the fear of missing out, which is, the social media stuff. And some of the one that stood out the most to me was that 88% of millennials who said, if I'm active on social media, they felt compelled to compare their situation to others. And I thought, well, that's just ridiculous. Because as you noted, a lot of those people are financing that lifestyle that they're portraying to the world on credit or through some other means. Um, like I can give an example. My daughter has a friend who likes to portray a very, very fancy lifestyle online. And people ask, well, how do you do it? And she says, well, I have a job. Well, she forgets to mention the part that she's living at home with her parents, and everything she's showing you is her parents.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing this fancy lifestyle and saying, oh, I got to do that. But the reality is, if you can't afford it, you got to kind of live within the means.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
So,
easier said than done, unfortunately.
right. But so anyways, that's why I thought your statement was really, really telling. And as you pointed out, very relevant to our social media world. So another statement that you've made that I'd like to expand upon is that you've indicated that debt is the enemy of millennials and becoming an adult was a rude awakening. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, when I graduated, I was very promptly saddled with my student loan payments and my car loan payments. But I was young and I was relatively unattached, and there was things that I wanted to do. I wanted to travel, I wanted to save money, I wanted to maybe eventually buy a house. And it felt like every turn I made, my debt was holding me back. Whether it was my monthly payments, having to suck that money out of my budget every month, or the interest charges making it seemingly impossible to pay the debt down. It just seemed like it was a weight that was dragging me down. So that's why I decided, I'm not really going to make much meaningful progress on these other goals unless I get rid of that debt once and for all. And then I'll be free to do what I like, what I please, and focus on the goals that actually matter to me. So that was part of my mindset of choosing to pay off my debt first before pursuing other goals like travel and home ownership.
Right. And I think that that's a fantastic approach to it. In I call it my day job, I help people with financial difficulties. And just yesterday, I was talking to an individual who would be in your situation, in that their debt is holding them back from moving on to their lifestyle issues that they're hoping to accomplish. But it's because they did the undergrad and then they went beyond that. So student loans, lines of credit, credit cards, about 125,000 in debt right now, which is a significant amount. And so it is sort of preventing them, as you put it, to move forward with their plans of home ownership, et cetera, in the future. So having that dedicated plan as to how we're going to tackle that debt and extinguish it so that they can then move forward once we get it down to a reasonable level, I think is the key to their situation. And as you pointed out. So what was the biggest challenge for you in you decided you're going to take on your debt. What was your biggest challenge to taking it on and getting it down and it paid off?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was just having the dollars to send towards my debt every single month. So my debt was fairly substantial, and I essentially attacked it from all angles. So the first thing that I did was I looked up any incentive programs that were available to help reduce student loan debt for new graduates, and I was able to take advantage of a few of those. But after that, it really just became a matter of maximizing my income and minimizing my expenses. That was the biggest challenge. So I took it to a pretty significant extreme, I think more so than some other people would feel comfortable doing. But I moved into a 400 square foot cottage in rural New Brunswick because the rent was really, really low. I didn't travel or anything like that for the period of time that I was paying off my debt. Every income tax return, all my birthday money, all of my, like any extra money through my job, that all went directly to my debt. It was quite strict with that. And then I also ended up side hustling. So I started my blog, and then that eventually led to some freelance writing opportunities. And all of the money that I earned, besides the amount that I set aside for taxes, all of that money went to paying off my debt. And through that, I was able to, instead of just making the minimum monthly payments on both my debts, I was able to pay thousands of dollars extra per month on my debts. And that's how I ultimately eliminated them so quickly.
Which is fantastic and something I tell people all the time. Those minimum payments don't really help you because you're not attacking the principal, because most of it's just interest. So that was great. So before we go to the break, I'd like to understand how you kept so motivated. Because as you said, you put yourself on a really strict plan. So how did you stay so motivated to get through it?
So I think the plan that I was on would not have worked if it hadn't been such a short timeline. So the timeline that I was on, I was going to be debt free in 2 years. And that's short enough that I was able to keep up that grueling pace for that period of time. But I also rewarded myself along the way. So when I paid off my student loans, I had a little party for myself. And then when I paid off my car loan, which was my final debt, I had a fairly substantial amount of money put aside just to blow for fun money because I had been so strict during that time. But I found that by sort of gamifying that, by like setting up rewards at the end, I was able to stay motivated. And then I also was writing about it quite substantially on my blog. So there was a lot of updates back then about my debt progress. So I felt like people were cheering me on, and I had the ability to report my wins to people who actually cared. And that helped a lot with the motivation.
Oh, that's great. So we're going to go to break. And when we come back from break, I'd like to continue the discussion about how we can help millennials to move forward financially. Welcome back to Money Matters with Doug Jones. Today, we're talking about millennials and millennial debt and how millennials can move forward. And we're joined by what I would say is an expert in the field, and Jordann Brown, because Jordann has been able to extinguish her debt, create savings, buy a house, and is a true success story of, if you're dedicated, how millennials can make this work. So Jordann, we were talking about your story before, and we were sort of getting into the dedication you put to getting rid of your debt. But in addition to that, you actually created savings at the same time. And so can you tell us how you did that? Were you trying to create savings at the same time, or did you extinguish the debt and then put money aside for savings? Can you go through that for us?
So in my case, I started out by saving a very small emergency fund. So that would be like a few $1,000s. And that was before I really tackled my debt. And that was just to cover like the real emergencies that I didn't want to put on a credit card. So like emergency car repairs, vet bills, those sorts of things.
Mhm.
Then because I was fairly young, I didn't feel pressured to save for retirement right away. So I just put all of my money towards my debt. And then once that was paid off, I focused on saving. And the first thing that I did, I liken it to sort of digging yourself out of a hole. So in paying off my debt, I was digging myself out of this hole. But once I was debt free, I was just on the edge of the hole. I wasn't back from the edge at all. Like I could still roll back into the hole at any moment because yes, I didn't have any debt, but I also had no savings at all. So the next few years, I really focused on getting as far away from the edge of that hole as possible by saving first an emergency fund. So that was 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for me ended up being about $10,000. And that was quite momentous because it really helped me relax and feel more comfortable and not worried about having all my progress be undone from, just one or two emergencies that popped up. And then after that, I began saving for retirement at a fairly young age. I just put, a few $100s away here and there every month just to get started. I wasn't doing it very aggressively, but I knew that compound interest was, really going to work in my favor if I started sooner rather than later. And then focused on the goal of home ownership was the next big thing for me. So part of that and part of staying motivated for that was setting a goal to save $25,000 before age 25. There is no reason that I set that number except that it sounded cool and it made me want to achieve it because it sounded cool.
Right. And so that's amazing. So I'm really want to explore a little bit more about how you stayed on track. So, again, I talk to people about budgeting, and I was talking to a millennial, and I was talking to them about their budget and their income coming in from the job they have and where there was money was going to go. And I came to the tax-free savings account. And, we'll put money into the TSFA right now every year to maximize the contributions. And the person looked at me with like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm young. I want to experience life. I want to travel. I want fun. And so because I'm young, I'll worry about retirement down the road. And I sort of went, okay, but what about the time value of money? Or as you put it, compounding of interest. And I got a blank stare. So I got to assume that wasn't resonating. So how do we educate millennials that the importance of that and why they're going to be really thankful for it when they are closer to my age?
Mhm. So I think there's two things. The first thing is just education on the power of compound interest. Um, there are some really great online calculators that will show the benefit of saving a little bit of money now versus saving a lot of money later. So if you're in your situation where you're trying to educate someone, I would definitely, use the classic example of, if you wait 20 years to start saving, you're going to have to save, 3 times as much. So that's a good argument for getting started now. But then I also think that for many millennials, when you start to talk about saving for retirement, it seems like a bit of an intimidating topic of discussion because, for one thing, many people seem to be under the impression that you need to start saving a lot of money and it's going to, really negatively impact your budget right away. That's not true. If you're not saving at all, just start with $50. You won't miss it. I promise you will not miss that in your budget. And then, 6 months down the road, if you're feeling pretty good about that, why not up it to 150 and just keep going as you get more comfortable and as you get raises and you'll have more money in your budget. Maybe you move in with someone, so there's more money in your budget, then you can take the time to just sort of up things in little increments. That's exactly what I did when I started saving. I only saved maybe like $200 a month. And as I got raises and as I just refinanced my mortgage for a lower mortgage rate. So now there's more money in my budget. I just slid that extra money into my retirement savings. And it adds up over time. Now I save $650 a month instead of $200 a month. And I'm pretty comfortable with that. And I think that, yeah, most millennials feel like it's going to immediately impact them. They're not going to be able to have fun. They're not going to be able to do the things that they want to do. And that just doesn't have to be true.
Right. That's great. And I like to build up, get comfortable with it, and work it up. Okay, so there's another statement I want to refer to something you wrote, and I'm actually going to read it so I don't make any mistakes. And it says, understanding how you feel about your money and being mindful of your attitude surrounding money is an important part of overall healthy money management. If you've got bad money habits, recognizing that you feel this way is the first step to fixing the problem. I'm in agreement, but can you expand on it for the millennials watching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best way to explain this is with an example that I have seen or have had people ask me about many, many times. And that is consolidating credit card debt onto a line of credit. So I have been posed this question many times. They say, hey, I've got this, $3,000 of credit card debt. My interest rate is 19%. Is it a smart idea to move this money onto my line of credit that's only charging me, a much lower, probably single digit percentage? And my answer to them is always, it depends. Why did you accumulate this credit card debt? If it was accumulated, during an emergency, then I say absolutely move it over to your line of credit. You'll save money on interest and you'll pay it off more quickly. If you accumulated it because you're consistently spending more than you are paying on your credit card every month, or because you view your credit card as free money, that's a toxic money mindset. And moving the money onto your line of credit will free up your credit card. But if you don't change the money mindset, you're going to end up in the same position, except now you're going to have credit card debt and line of credit debt, and you're going to be trying to pay them both off. So you need to recognize the symptoms of a problem, which is usually some kind of debt, get to the root of the issue, which is usually a money mindset that is unhealthy, and solve that issue first before you can start making those long-term healthy choices for yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to find yourself on this merry-go-round of debt accumulation, consolidation, more accumulation, consolidation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in my job, I see that all the time. The big one right now, I know I'm in Ontario and you're not, but I think the increase in home values is an issue across the whole country. And I call it ATMing your house. People are continually going and increasing the debt against the house, generally with the HELOC, the secured line of credit, which pays off their credit card debt, but they don't extinguish the credit card. So then it goes into a cycle, and it can create significant problems for people. So we were talking about credit cards, and I know in some of your writings for RateHub, you actually go into credit cards, carrying credit card debt. What's the best credit card for a person? So let's start with credit card debt. I think people should avoid it. It's a very high interest rate. Your opinions on it?
I think that credit cards should only be used as a way to earn points for spending you were going to do anyway. So ideally, you will have the money in the bank to back up this spending that you're going to be doing on your credit card. If you need to leave something on your credit card, you should try and only leave it for, maybe a month, and understand that there's going to be interest charges, and prioritize paying that off. I've been in both situations where I have, used a credit card as an emergency fund. It's not ideal, but it happens. But in those cases, you should be aware that you're going to be charged a lot of interest on that credit card, and you should make it a very, very high priority to pay that off. For myself, or ideally, you should only be using a credit card to pay for planned spending. So if you're taking a trip and you're going to book a flight, you should have the cash on hand already to pay for that flight.
Right. I actually recommend them to people for credit rebuilding if they've had a problem too. So use the credit card every month, never exceed 30% of the available room, pay it off in full every month. So it's actually reflecting as a positive on your credit bureau, which of course is then going to make borrowing more economical for you. So are there certain credit cards you recommend to people, or is different cards of more use to different people?
I think choosing a credit card is an incredibly personal choice, and there is really no one size fits all solution for everybody. I think when you're picking a credit card, you should really think about what you're going to use it for, and that's going to determine what kind of credit cards are going to be right for you, or what class of credit cards you should look at. So for example, in your example, if your primary purpose is to rebuild credit, you may want to look at a secured credit card or something like that doesn't require, a minimum credit score to qualify for. If your primary purpose is to keep that credit card as your emergency, which lots of people do that, you should focus on getting a low interest credit card. There are some credit cards that have interest rates in the low single digits versus 19 to 20, 21%. If you have a good handle on your spending habits and you're ready to look at travel rewards cards, no fee travel rewards cards exist. They're a really great way to sort of dip your toe in the pool and see how much you're actually going to earn in rewards year over year. And then like the ultimate goal would be to have a really, really excellent relationship with your credit card and use it for daily spending, and then be spending enough that it makes sense to have either like cashback or travel rewards, and you're earning enough cashback or travel rewards to offset an annual fee card, because they tend to have the best rate of return.
Okay. The next question for you is, you've been successful in purchasing a home. To a lot of millennials, that's a goal. Can you expand on what was your thinking, how you saved up for you've gone through sort of your dedicated plan of retiring debt. You sort of stayed on that budget to then put money forward for savings and the deposit money. But home ownership comes with additional expenses. Maybe you could cover some of that.
Yeah, so as a homeowner, I became a homeowner in 2016. It was a huge priority of mine, and it took me maybe 15 months to save a 10% down payment. That said, I'm located in a low cost of living area, so I can buy a lot more house than the average person can. But I also took into consideration, beyond just the mortgage payment, things like property taxes, insurance, utilities, and regular home maintenance. And I factored that all in when choosing my budget. And through that, was able to get a reasonable purchase price that left enough money left over at the end of the day, so I could continue to save for retirement and then also travel and enjoy my life as well.
That's awesome. So I'm sure that many millennials who are watching are going to want to get in touch with you or read your blog. So can you give us the details on how people can get in touch with you, or where your blog is so they can read it? Because I know there's a lot of information there since 12.
Absolutely. You can find my blog at myalternatelife.com. And then I'm also on Twitter at myalternatblog.
Well, again, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd like to thank the viewers for joining us today. As usual, if you have any questions or comments about the show, or suggest future show topics for us, you can go to the Rogers homepage and click on the show link. Until next time, thanks very much, everyone, and goodbye.